Crazy kind of session, but wonderful, very energetic, Mahesh. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so how many of you thirsty, sleepy, hungry? Okay. Everybody, this is the privileges of a program manager. I get to blackmail you a bit. So every pass out of here requires a 2,000 rupees new currency. Right? That's your fee for early coffee, tea. Otherwise, you'll have to park yourself for one more session. And as I said, I promised we'll have you on time for lunch. Okay? So keep yourself awake. We have one more session to go, and immediately after that, we'll break for tea, coffee, and parallel tracks and so forth. Thank you for keeping pace with us. I have with me the next speaker of the morning session, Raghavendra Manavalli, Director of Product Development and Site Leader, Allscripts India Private Limited. Raghavendra is here to talk about testing for competitive advantage. And a brief introduction before I hand over to Raghavendra. As the Director of Product Development for Allscripts, he comes with over 18 years of experience in building enterprise applications, working with globally distributed teams, a strong background in technology, architecture, engineering, healthcare. Raghavendra is passionate about engineering and specializes in managing technology and innovation specially. Ladies and gentlemen, those leaving the hall with the intent of early tea, coffee, trust me, they will not open it till I say so. So please help yourself. If you thought you could bypass me like the bank queues for 2,000 bucks currency, that's not going to happen. All right, so Raghavendra, you all set? Wonderful. All over to you. 25 minutes, then we'll have a Q&A. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Raghav.
Good morning. Looks like I am the only guy in between tea and yourself. So I'll make it short and sweet so that the message is conveyed. Change. I think the earlier speakers have made it easy for me by setting the context. But when we talk about change, one company that comes to my mind is Kodak. Also known as Eastman Kodak, was very popular in 1976. It was the market leader in films and cameras. So basically it had a market share of around 85% in films and around 90% in cameras. In 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. What happened? Such a wonderful company, one of the top 5 brands, huge market share, and filing for bankruptcy. Well, Kodak used a business model called as razor blade. What do you mean by razor blade? You sell razor for nominal cost, but you make money on blades. Similarly, Kodak sold cameras for nominal cost and tried to make money on the repeat sales of the films. Then came an era, digital era of digital photography. And Kodak looked at it and said, well, this does not fit into our business model because there are no repeat sales. You buy memory card once and you keep wiping it off, right? The irony is, 25 years before anyone could have come up with a digital camera, Kodak had a prototype. Yes, it was as big as a bread toaster, had complex connection to connect to the devices, used to take 20 seconds to process the images. But still, it was a fantastic innovation. But Kodak was worried, they were very risk averse that it would cannibalize its own business. What happened? We know the history. The likes of Sony came in and totally wiped off Kodak out of the market. So similarly, there are several companies. If you look at the Fortune 500 list 20 years back, 42% of those companies which were in Fortune 500 20 years back are no more in business. That's the change that we are talking about. And when we talk about change, this change is very eminent in the last few years where new startups are coming up with innovative products and really competing with larger business. While this change is sweeping on one side of the spectrum, on totally another side, we have resources or engineers continue to wonder, what's my next role? What's my career path? Am I outdated in the industry? How can engineers and organizations help each other so that they can stay competitive and they can be successful. That's what we are going to cover in the subsequent slides. Traditionally, if you go into any traditional development, it's all about cost, scope, quality, and schedule. You give me a spec, and I'll deliver according to it. But if you look at the new generation companies, it's all about, you may have the spec, but this isn't right. Have you seen the new app that Myntra has launched? We can make it much more easy for customers. So testers are playing a role of product managers too. They're expanding their horizon. And they are giving inputs to the product management on how the application should look like. This change has enabled the startups to come up with innovative products. During this change that we are talking about, how have some of the old companies, larger companies, which have been there for decades, still surviving? What has made them survive? Why do people still go to them? Brand. That is not something that you build in one day. You build it over a period of time. And you continuously, repetitively build it over a period of time, and you brand yourself either for quality, or either for innovation, or for the feature performance. Let's take an example of Toyota. If you want to buy a car, the cab drivers are here even fine to buy a Toyota car or a Toyota Innova which has 1 lakh miles over it, right? And even in US, if anyone wants to buy a used car for around $7,000, $8,000, they are totally okay to go for Toyota which is 8 years old, whereas you get Ford or Chevy for 4-year-old for the same price. Why is this? Toyota has built the quality revolution. They have something called as Toyota Production System that they use in their factory. What does Toyota Production System do? They spec to the level of detail. If you want to fit a car seat inside a car, the size of the nut, how many times you should turn it, what should be the torque, and how many seconds it should take. It is spec to that level of detail. Many companies, intra-industry and inter-industry, have tried to replicate it, but they have failed, right? Similarly, I want to talk about another story. In 1950s, Coca-Cola was the leader, market leader in the United States. Then came Pepsi. So Pepsi started branding themselves as brand for youth, and then conducted nationwide experiments or nationwide campaigns where they started blindfolding people and said, take these two bottles, bottle of Pepsi and bottle of Coke. And many of these customers preferred Pepsi for its sweeter taste. Then all of a sudden, Coca-Cola realized, maybe our product is not good. To compete with Pepsi, we have to have a new product which is much more sweeter than Pepsi. Then they came up with something called as New Coke. And they had a nationwide campaign to release New Coke. Very next day, entire nation boycotted New Coke, saying we want our old classic Coca-Cola back. That was the strength of Coke brand. Even today, many people, they don't refer it as cola, they refer it as Coke. And obviously, it did not happen in 1 day or 2 days. They built this over a period of time. So, how do companies really compete? There are two types of strategies that the company use. Either cost, where you can be very productive, where you can be efficient, just like Chinese phones. They give you at a nominal cost, but they sell more volumes to make the margin. Or they try to be unique and try to be different. Like Apple. So there was a joke circulating that you have to sell your kidney to buy Apple 7. I mean, for a fact, why is that Apple demanding so much of a premium? That is the brand value that they have built. So having cost is important. It is very necessary to be productive and to be efficient, but it is not sufficient. You need to be different. You need to be unique. How do we build that uniqueness, and how do we build different features into our product? Predominantly, let's take a situation that we are building a user story or building a new feature into our program. We always look at asking ourselves, is the product being built right? Are we working according to our spec? But we rarely ask, are we building the right product? So this is what the new generation companies are doing. The moment you start questioning, are we building the right product? The entire mindset changes and the outcome changes. Yes, but how do we realize this? What are the right questions to ask when we think about building a new product or building the right product? I call this as a 7 dimension of product acceptability. whenever you are building a product, asking questions on these 7 dimensions are extremely important. The first one, I call it as functional performance. It's the regular performance of the feature functions that we are talking about. But the moment we talk about feature function, one thing that we have to keep in our mind is, if I was a customer, will I really buy this? Will it really help me? Next is acquisition cost. LG came up with an internet fridge or internet refrigerator. You might be aware of it. So what did LG have in that refrigerator? What was different? It had everything ranging from alarm, clock, MP3 player, and it had a unique feature. That unique feature where it can look at the inventory in your refrigerator, and if the inventory level goes down, it can place an automated order to the nearby grocery store to fill your refrigerator. But the customer started asking, how is it going to help me? Yeah, fine, fantastic feature, but I'm not going to pay that extra for what you are delivering because I don't use it. So really looking at the acquisition cost, am I willing to pay for what is being asked is very important. And then ease of use. The moment you release your product, you don't want to send a fleet of education engineers to educate people. Today you use your mobile phones and also you use operating systems. No one comes and trains you on that. And then operating cost. I have 300 employees working in a bank. I release my newer version of software. Previously it used to take 2 minutes to complete a workflow, and now it takes 3 minutes. So 1 minute per 300 engineers. Imagine the productivity loss that the organization will go through. Reliability. How frequently does your system go down? Yeah, I mean, we are using some service from the back end, so we'll have to restart every day or every month. Oh, what about my patients, or what about my bank customers? Yeah, we'll figure out something in the next 6 months. Doesn't work anymore. Serviceability. Do we have a good logging mechanism where we get to know what are the problems that our customers are going through and not asking them to create a ticket, so that we can proactively analyze through these tools and then deploy our solutions remotely so that we don't say next hotfix is coming in next 1 year. Not acceptable. And then comes compatibility. We live in an ecosystem. We don't live in silos anymore. So when we talk about compatibility, the moment we release product, what interfaces are broken? Which other product that we have integrated to isn't working anymore? So that is something that we need to take care. So focusing on these 7 dimensions ideally helps us to ask the right questions and imagine, are we really delivering value to the customer, or are we forcing him to be an early adopter to use our products? So once we have questions on this, yeah, definitely there are some new ideas that we need to come up with to solve these problems. And how do we ideate? Is there a framework to really ideate? So yes, there is a framework to ideate, but how do we prioritize the 7 dimensions? Are all these 7 important? Which is the most important one? Let's take an example. I am building an ultrasound machine which can be either used in a hospital or it can also be used in doctor's office. So if I am using in a hospital, my requirements are different, and if I am using in a doctor's office, my requirements are different. The inflow of patients into the hospital is huge, and you have a dedicated technician to take care of the ultrasound machine in the hospital. In the doctor's office, doctor himself has to take care of these things, and the inflow is low. So when I look at compatibility, the system that you place in hospital has to integrate with other systems. So in a scale of 1 to 10, hospital says my compatibility rate is high, whereas doctor's office would care less for it. And similarly, if I look at the acquisition cost, the doctors would say, I don't want a robust machine, I want something that does my job correctly. I'm not going to pay you more for what you are asking. Whereas hospital might say, I need robustness. I need robustness, so I'm ready to pay whatever you need, but I need really robustness. In terms of ease of use, you have a trained technician who could basically take care in the hospital, but whereas in the clinic, no, the doctor himself has to take care. So it depends on what type of customers you are catering to. That determines your priority, and that determines what is the priority we need to give this to 7 dimensions, which will come back later. And once I have some ideas or I have a problem, how do I ideate? Brainstorming is the most used and abused word in the industry. It's not about taking a plate of cookies, going into a room, or I need to brainstorm, okay, we need to have an offsite. You don't need to have an offsite. Brainstorming is all about challenging the underlying assumptions. How do I challenge my underlying assumptions? This doesn't work. We have tried in the past. Our customers won't like it. We have spoken to them. Okay? So how do you know your customers? A mother telling, I know my children, agreeable. She has 2, 3, 4. She knows all the children. We telling, we know customers. You don't know 60,000 customers. You have not spoken to every one of them. You know only sample set of customers. Are they the right set of customers that we are talking to? That is something that we need to talk in terms of brainstorming, challenging the underlying assumption. The next important concept is analogs. In innovation terminology, there is a concept called analogs, which tells, look at something which has been extremely successful in the industry, learn from it, and replicate it within your own product. For example, I am building a billing screen in my healthcare application. I can look at other products and see how easy those billing screens are and replicate in my product. Or I can even look at intra-industry or inter-industry. I can go to banking domain and look at some of the banking sites. How easy are those billing applications and import into my applications. So when we talk about analogs, one thing that comes to my mind is there were about 20 million premature babies or underweight babies that were born every year. And an incubator for an hospital used to cost $20,000, which they could not afford. So many of these babies were not able to get incubated. So there was one company which started thinking in this direction. Let me build a low-scale incubator which can be helpful for the entire society. They looked at various options to scale down the incubator, but they did not find or draw inspiration from anything. Then they looked at kangaroo. When a kangaroo baby is born, it's around 11 inch. How does kangaroo incubate? So they looked at the kangaroo pouch. Can we create a pouch like this? And that inspired them to come up with a pouch which can be sold for $25. And what more, when you return the pouch back, you get it reimbursed. And you don't need to worry about charging it. All you have to do is submerge it in a hot water, it gets charged. That's how the ideas are derived from in terms of analogs. And one of the fantastic innovation companies we talk about is Apple. When iPod came into picture, there's a famous conversation when Steve Jobs was asked, what are you doing when Microsoft is eating your market share? You only have 7% of the market share. He said, I'm going to wait for the next big thing. So what was that next big thing? The first thing that came out was iPod. It was a fantastic discovery, I would say, not an innovation, because it's nothing but a combination of your Sony Walkman and Napster. Sony Walkman was a personal listening machine. They wanted a compact personal listening machine. Napster used to allow you to download songs, and they came up with iTunes. And then they decided, how are we going to sell this? Let's look at Gillette, razor and blade model. Similarly, they sold razor for a nominal cost and made money on blades. Let's sell iTunes at a nominal cost and make money on the iPods. That is the strength of analog. Then comes reverse engineering. So looking at something which is really good and achieving the same outcome through different means. When the photography business was doing well, Polaroid came up with an instant photography camera. Kodak looked at it, reverse engineered, cut open, and then came up with their own version of the product which can do instant photography. This is another way to come up with the benefit of farmers and scale down the price. That's another way of drawing inspiration. One might ask, hey, why do you expect this out of an engineer? I'm not a superman. Isn't it a product manager's job? Well, that is the shift that we are seeing in the industry, where you call yourself, that's why I'm not calling it as a tester, I'm calling yourself as an engineer. So that is where the engineers are expanding their horizon. So I want to share this experience. When I was coding 5 years back, I had a tester with me. We were given a task of integrating our software or our IT application to Kiosk. The kiosk that you see in airports, We have similar kiosk placed in doctors' clinics, which allows patients to register. We haven't seen kiosk. So the task was, you integrate your healthcare IT application into kiosk. So, yeah, natural questions, okay, when is the time? What is the cost that we need to be incurring? But the tester that I had, she raised her hand and said, I want to see kiosk first. Obvious question was, why do you want to see kiosk? We are not even going to have kiosk. We are not going to see kiosk. They have given us the spec and we have to do as per the spec. No, I want to see the kiosk. I know that there will be a problem. So then they sent a picture of kiosk to us. She asked 3 questions in her email. Only 3 questions. I have my social security number, which I am going to punch in here. I have my date of birth and other personal details. What is the guarantee that no one else will oversee on my shoulders, get those details, which is going to be a problem for me at a later point of time. I'm a woman, I come with a bag. I have purse, I have a lot of money. Where will I park my bag? These questions, once it was sent, and what about the security? I mean, is there a palm secure or is there biometric? These questions enabled the kiosk company to remodel their kiosk completely. She was a tester, and no kidding, today she heads the product management division and derives the complete roadmap for the entire portfolio, just in 5 years. That is the thought process that will help an engineer to transition. Today we are all worried, what's my next role? Is being a test manager the only role, or being the test architect the only role? Fortunately enough, the previous presentation, I saw a lot of aspects in testing, so no one needs to be worried, what's my future? And when we come up with these innovation, it is also important to consider an entire ecosystem. How well will my product fit into that ecosystem is extremely important. Today we all are looking at Go Green. We want to read books via ebooks. Kindle, very famous, but Sony came up with this very much before Kindle. Sony came up with the e-reader very much before Kindle. But why did it fail? Because authors and publishers were worried of piracy and royalty. The ecosystem was not ready yet. Kindle came when it was successful, and then they took the market. Similarly, a lot of people who are worried about flat tires. When I'm driving a car, what happens if I have a flat tire? I don't know how to change my tire. So Michelin came up with a fantastic innovation of run flat. Even if you have a flat tire, you can drive for another 50 miles and then get it repaired. But it again failed. Fantastic innovation of the time again failed. Why? The garage mechanics did not know how to fix it. They did not educate them. There were no right tools. Considering the complementary assets which complement your product is extremely important. That's why I want to quote the Michelin example here. How well will my product fit into the ecosystem is entirely important. That is the first thing we have to ask before dwelling down into the frame. And how do I measure the success? So we spoke about the 7 dimensions. We spoke about ideations. How will I know that whether these 7 priorities or these ideations are successful? We can look at the elasticities in terms of, did our market share go up? Did our customer satisfaction scores on our product, are they going up? There is one way, I liked the theme of this year in STC, which said, we also need to take care of the future, but we also need to be in the present. This will help us to incrementally look at each changes that we are making into our product so that we can continue to gain competitive advantage and we can be well ahead in the market. What's in for me? Yep, you have made me a Superman, from Spider-Man to Superman. I need to do all this. What's in for me? The biggest question that we ask today is, what's my next career path? So am I outdated in the industry? So now you don't need to worry about the limited role set that you have. I have seen many engineers who used to work as testers or developers 2-3 years back in a startup companies now are also moving to other companies or in the same companies taking a role of product specialist, solution architect, product managers. It's just about unleashing the potential within and asking the right questions. So wider career options that are available. And I like this particular quote, which talks about in a business ecosystem, you can either be a predator or you can be a prey. You don't decide it. Once